outside the corner store with a crumpled note in my palm and the taste of bitterness cooling on my tongue, staring after a skinny child who vanished between parked cars as if he'd never existed. In my mind, the blue flowered mug on the kitchen island began to glow like a hazard light. For weeks I had moved as if wading through syrup, heavy and slow, half swallowed by sleep. A razor-thin thought pierced the haze. What if the fog wasn't grief at all? What if someone had been pouring it into me one cup at a time? I am Dorothy Wells, 69, the sort of woman who once woke at 6 a.m. without an alarm and could hear a pin drop 3 rooms away. 6 months after my husband Frank died, I moved into my son Michael's home in Denver. Temporary, they called it, until I found my feet. His wife Sarah worked long shifts as a registered nurse at a private surgical center. She smiled like a person reading a script and brewed coffee each morning with the efficiency of a medication pass. She always handed me the same blue mug with tiny flowers, while she and Michael drank from identical white cups, stamped from some impersonal mold. At first I was grateful for the ritual. Routines can stitch a day together after a loss. But the stitches pulled tight. Mornings turned thick and indistinct. By 10 a.m., sometimes 11 a.m., I could not climb out of the drowse. Dizzy spells brushed past me like moths. Sarah cooed concern, suggesting a visit to Dr. Morrison for something to help you sleep. The irony would land later like a dropped tray. That Tuesday at 8:30 a.m., quarters in my pocket for a newspaper, because old habits are a kind of prayer. I stepped into the bright air and remembered 43 years of mornings with Frank, his groans over the Rockies, my circles around recipes we'd never quite make. Outside the store, a boy with a torn backpack thrust a folded note into my hand and whispered, "Don't drink the coffee." The lady with the yellow hair put something in it. I seen her. The handwriting inside was wobbly but determined, underlined with a line that said, "He watched from the alley and she didn't know." I lifted my head ready to ask questions, and the child was already gone. A ghost nobody invited, but everyone needed. I walked home as if the sidewalk might crack the world suddenly too loud. On the island, the blue mug waited half full, harmless as a lullaby. I tipped it into the sink, watched it spiral away and rinsed until the ceramic squeaked under my fingers. When Sarah returned around 10 a.m., she asked too quickly, too brightly if I'd finished my coffee. "Not in the mood today," I said, as casual as weather talk. Something flickered behind her eyes, disappointment, then calculation, like a small electrical storm. That night, for the first time in weeks, my mind stayed clear into the dark. The house breathed around me. Television murmurs the hush of water. A car door at 11 p.m. From the quiet rose a memory of conversations that flattened when I entered, and a word folded into the hush like a blade. Facilities. At 6 a.m. the next morning, I found Sarah in her robe, the machine purring a neat stream into the pot. She reached for the blue mug, a movement too practiced to be anything but habit. I accepted it with a soft smile, lifted the cup to my lips, let the liquid glance my tongue, then set it down and excused myself to the laundry room. There I poured it away, the smell bitter and ordinary and suddenly monstrous. On the stairs, Sarah's voice drifted down small and tight. "She seems more alert today. Maybe we should increase the dosage." The sentence cracked the morning cleanly in two. I stood with one hand on the banister, listening to the quiet that follows confession. Anger, when it cools, becomes an instrument. Mine sharpened. Every morning after that, I performed. I lifted the blue mug, sipped without swallowing, and wandered the kitchen with grandmotherly slowness until the sink swallowed the rest. I learned the rhythm of the house the minute Sarah's phone calls bloomed and she forgot I existed, the moment she rehearsed concern for friends who loved the version of her she curated online. I lay on the couch with my eyes half closed and heard her whisper to her sister that my confusion was worsening. She said professional help as if kindness could disguise a cage. She mentioned a place in Lakewood without mentioning that the bed there would be purchased by my savings, not hers. By Friday at 7 a.m., opportunity arrived dressed like an errand. Michael had flown to Phoenix for a client. Sarah announced a day at her sister's because of a custody skirmish that required her presence. The house folded into silence after her car turned the corner. In the stillness, I felt my old spine again, the one Frank teased, calling it stainless. I pulled the step stool to the high cabinet where Sarah kept special items that were more show than substance Madagascar vanilla glass jars that made faint music when moved. Behind the vanilla crouched an amber vial without a label liquid inside clear as a lie. When I turned it to the light, it clung to the glass with the faint thickness of syrup. I photographed it in place, then in my hand, then leaning against the vanilla bottle like a criminal beside an unwitting friend. The cap twisted off cleanly. It smelled like nothing at all. Evidence makes you hungry for more. In the bathroom, behind luminous jars declaring youth for those who can pay, I found printouts on liquid melatonin dosed for elderly patients, not gentle droplets, but aggressive quantities designed to anchor a body to a bed and sand the edges off memory and will. Some lines were underlined, numbers were circled. Other pages mentioned over-the-counter sleep syrups containing diphenhydramine, helpful in theory and in excess stupefying. I took photos of margins, highlights the neatness that gave her away. Grief sloshed at my ankles. Rage carried me forward. Then, in Michael's office, the room I helped him set up the desk, I gave him 5 Christmases ago. I remembered the spare key taped beneath the top drawer. Inside waited a tidy dossier brochures for assisted living facilities with bright patios and careful smiles, a consultation summary from an elder care attorney outlining incapacity proceedings and guardianship. My bank statements creased and annotated in Sarah's hand, calculating how long my savings would last under each care plan. A draft letter to Dr. Morrison alleged incidents that had never happened. I photographed everything and replaced each sheet precisely as I had found it. If they looked at me now, they would see the woman they preferred, small, tired, grateful for a nap. They would not see the woman arranging facts into a blade. By 3 p.m., a car door thudded outside. Sarah returned earlier than planned. I slid the drawer closed and moved to the living room with a newspaper open and my face composed into the peaceful blur she found convenient. "I'm back," she called. "How was your day quiet?" I said. Inside, something had changed in a way that would not change back. At 9 p.m., I laid out the photos in a private album on my phone and chose my navy dress, the one Frank swore made the world stand at attention. Tomorrow at 6:30 a.m., I would descend the stairs, steady and awake. Tomorrow at 7 a.m., I would stop pretending. At 6:30 a.m., the house was wrapped in the pale blue of early light when I buttoned the navy dress and pinned back my hair the way Frank used to, like neat and certain. The coffee machine coughed awake in the kitchen below, that familiar purr meant to sound domestic and harmless. Sarah stood at the counter in a silk robe, her eyes flicking up and down as if assessing whether I still fit the role she had written for me. "You look nice," she said, her hand reaching almost unconsciously for the blue mug. Special occasion. You could say that I answered, taking the cup but not drinking. Instead, I set my phone on the island and opened the first photo. The amber vial crouched behind Madagascar vanilla. I wanted to ask about this. The change in her face was instant, a tide yanked back to reveal rock. The pot slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, steam rising like smoke from a battlefield. "I don't know what you think here," she began, but I cut across evenly. "It's unlabeled, clear, slightly viscous, no scent, found on your highest shelf. Then there were the printouts in your bathroom." I swiped to the images lines, highlighted doses, circled the word sedation underlined, and the materials in Michael's office, brochures, attorney notes, my bank statements with your arithmetic. My voice did not rise. Calm was my weapon. "You've been very busy." Her shoulders squared, a mask sliding into place. "You're paranoid, Dorothy. We've all been worried about your sleep. I researched options to make you comfortable." "Options," I repeated, pouring the mug's contents into the sink, the sound too loud in the quiet house. "Comfort doesn't require drugging a woman until noon every day." The sash of her robe tightened around her waist. "You have no proof." "I have photographs, timestamps, and the last 3 mornings of clarity," I said, tapping the phone. "And I have ears. Yesterday at 7:15 a.m., you told Michael I seemed more alert and suggested increasing the dosage. If I'm wrong, then you should be relieved to show me exactly what's in that vial." Silence spread like a trapdoor opening beneath us. Her eyes darted toward the cabinet, then back to mine. Finally, the sweetness in her voice stripped away, leaving wire. "Fine. I gave you something to help you rest. Grief is a beast, Dorothy. You were drowning everyone in it. I did what was necessary." My jaw tightened. Necessary for whom? For your peace, for Michael's convenience, for the ledger, where you've already spent the money Frank and I saved for our old age. Her mouth narrowed. "Your money won't last forever. Assisted living is expensive. Someone has to be practical." "Practicality kept a roof over this family for 43 years, I said. "Michael comes home tomorrow at 8 p.m. When he walks through that door, you will tell him what you've been doing. If you don't, I will." Her laugh was brittle, sharp as ice breaking. "Who do you think he'll believe, his wife or his confused mother who wanders the house crying at 3 a.m.? I think he'll believe the truth he can see," I replied, lifting the phone. "And the truth, his gut has ignored." I stepped past her around the shards of porcelain and opened the back door to let in a rush of cool morning air. "Clean this up, Sarah. We wouldn't want anyone to slip." The next 36 hours felt like a game of chess. She floated through the house with an exaggerated calm, offering tea instead of coffee, her voice dipped in syrup. She thought if she played her part long enough, the scene would return to its old script. I declined everything but water. In the silence, I assembled a neat folder on my phone, each image dated and timed, each note scribbled on receipts whenever my head was clear enough. I called the clinic and requested an appointment for Monday at 9 a.m. "I suspect exposure to medication," I told the nurse. "Bring what you have," she said gently, "and don't drink anything you didn't pour yourself." I smiled into the receiver. Noted. On Sunday evening at 7:50 p.m., I watched headlights sweep the driveway. Michael's silhouette in the porch light stirred a tender ache beneath my armor. My boy. He stepped inside smelling of airplane air and hotel soap, dropped his bag and called Mom. I met him at the stairs. "Enlightening weekend," I said steadily. "Family meeting, please." Something in my tone pulled his shoulders straighter. He sat on the couch. Sarah slid beside him, her hand on his arm, her voice pitched low and clinical. "Michael, honey, your mother had an episode yesterday. Paranoia, accusations. I think we should call Dr. Morrison." I almost admired her timing label me before I spoke stamp confusion on my forehead so everything I said would blur. But the tactic only works if the audience wants the old ending. I set my phone on the coffee table face up and scrolled to the album. "What kind of accusations?" Michael asked. "The kind with pictures," I said. "Please look." He leaned forward, eyes scanning the first photo, the amber vial gleaming in the cabinet. Sarah drew a sharp breath, already moving to explain, but I raised a hand. Let him see. He swiped through images of highlighted dosages brochures for facilities, my bank statements marked with Sarah's calculations. His face paled with each one voice scraped raw when he finally asked, "Tell me this isn't real." Michael Sarah cooed, "Your mother hasn't been sleeping. She's been confused." "Confusion can be induced," I interrupted. 3 mornings without her coffee and my mind returned at 6 a.m. sharp. I met his eyes. "Son, you know me. Does that sound like dementia?" He looked from me to the phone, then to the untouched blue mug on the counter. And for the first time in months, I saw certainty slip from the story he had been sold. "Sarah." he said quietly. "Did you put anything in my mother's coffee?" Her fingers gripped his sleeve. I gave her melatonin. Small amounts. To help? Small, I asked. Your notes show otherwise. Michael's jaw tightened. We need to stop talking around it. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., Mom's seeing her doctor. If the tests confirm this, we call a lawyer. Tonight we talk about whether you can stay here. Her eyes sparked like flint. If I leave, I take half of everything. Michael did not raise his voice. You don't take half of crimes he answered. You answer for them. The room went very quiet. The hallway clock ticked like footsteps approaching. The quiet stretched like a held breath, the air between us trembling with unspoken verdicts. For the first time, I watched the polished mask slip from Sarah's face. Her smile was gone, replaced by something sharp and self-serving. She leaned closer to Michael, her voice lowering into a coaxing plea. "Michael, you know how hard it's been since your father passed. Your mother's grief was suffocating the house. I only wanted peace. I did what you didn't have the courage to do." The brazenness of her words startled even her, hanging in the air like smoke from a fire no one could deny. I leaned forward, my tone calm but weighted with steel. "You drugged me every morning. You wrote lies about my memory. You prepared to sign me away to strangers while you calculated how long my savings would last. Do not call that peace." Michael's hands trembled as he rose, his eyes locked on the woman he thought he knew. "Sarah, stop. You used my login to access her accounts, drafted letters to her doctor claiming things that never happened. Tell me this is some kind of misunderstanding." She folded her arms across her chest, her tone hardening. "I won't apologize for being practical. Families like ours drown under the weight of an aging parent. Do you want to end up bankrupt while she withers in our spare room?" Her words scraped against my heart, but it was Michael's response that mattered. His face tightened in a way I had never seen. "You don't get to talk about my mother like that. Not here. Not ever again." The decision settled into the room before anyone voiced it aloud. Sarah's presence in the house was finished. She raged, threatened lawyers, divorce settlements, hissed that I had poisoned her marriage. Michael stood silent, his jaw a stone. By midnight, her heels clattered down the stairs, suitcases rolling behind her. She made calls her sister, her mother, finally an attorney, each conversation spitting venom. But eventually the front door slammed, leaving an echo so hollow the house seemed to sigh with relief. Michael collapsed at the kitchen table, his face in his hands, every inch the lost boy I had once comforted through childhood nightmares. "I'm sorry, Mom," he repeated, voice breaking. "I should have seen it. I thought you were grieving, maybe slipping. I trusted her. I thought she was helping." I poured 2 mugs of coffee plain this time, sliding one toward him. "She was convincing," I said gently. "That's what manipulators do. But you see clearly now." He stared into the steam rising from his cup, as if it might hold a map out of the wreckage. "How do we even begin to fix this one truth at a time?" I answered. The next morning at 9 a.m., the clinic confirmed what my body already knew. My system carried sedatives at levels far beyond safe doses. The nurse frowned as she jotted notes. "This isn't typical melatonin use. These are doses that could leave someone semi-conscious for hours." The doctor promised to file a report. Michael drove me home in silence, his knuckles pale against the steering wheel. He knew now that Sarah hadn't been exaggerating my grief. She had been manufacturing incapacity. Within a week, legal machinery ground into motion. Divorce papers arrived thick with demands. Sarah's attorney painted me as unreliable a woman in cognitive decline, but the clinic's report unraveled that argument. Michael's lawyer presented the photographs, the annotated printouts, the banking records with Sarah's careful handwriting. Her defense collapsed like a punctured balloon. Worse for her, investigators filed elder abuse charges, drugging me, manipulating finances, forging records. Fraud, identity, theft, abuse, words heavy enough to fracture the pristine image she had built. Her nursing license was suspended while the case wound its way through the courts. One afternoon, as I sipped tea at the kitchen table, Detective Martinez called. "Mrs. Wells, we've located the boy who gave you that note." My heart lurched. The boy. His name is Tommy Chen, 11 years old, missing from the foster system for 3 months. He's been living in an abandoned building near the store. Relief nearly buckled me. "Is he safe?" "Yes, ma'am. And he told us something you'll want to hear." My grip on the phone tightened. "What he said, he saw your daughter-in-law put liquid in your mug most mornings. He recognized it because his former foster mother used to drug him the same way." The floor seemed to tilt under me. I remembered his haunted eyes, the way his hand shook as he pressed the note into mine. His own suffering had taught him to recognize mine. "Can I see him?" I asked. "He's with Child Services right now," the detective said, "but he asked if he could make sure you're all right." When I told Michael, he sat heavily, his expression cracking open. "Mom, he saved your life. Maybe all of ours." The next afternoon, Tommy arrived with a caseworker. He looked smaller without the armor of urgency, his hair freshly washed, his backpack cleaner. But his seriousness remained. "You didn't drink it, did you?" he asked instantly. "No, sweetheart," I told him. "Thanks to you, I didn't." Relief sagged through his narrow shoulders, softening his thin frame. That night, Michael voiced what I had been holding silently. "We have space here. We could foster him. Maybe even adopt." His eyes carried both guilt and new resolve. "Are you sure?" I asked. He nodded. "We need to build something real again, and he deserves a family that won't use him or poison him into silence." The weeks that followed reshaped the very air in the house. Where silence and suspicion once pooled, a cautious rhythm began to emerge. At first, Tommy came only under the careful eye of his caseworker. He sat at the dining table, clutching his backpack like a lifeline, answering questions in short sentences. He ate with quiet urgency, as if every meal might be the last someone offered him. But slowly, gently, the edges softened. A laugh slipped from him one evening when Michael fumbled a joke about baseball. The sound startled us all. Rusty, awkward, but real. Another night, he fell asleep on the couch math book still open on his chest. I pulled a quilt over his small frame, my heart aching at how unnatural safety still seemed to him. By the second month the paperwork was filed. Tommy was officially placed in our home as a foster child, though in every meaningful way he was already ours. With steady meals, rest, and reassurance, he began to transform. The shadows under his eyes lightened his shoulders, straightened, and his voice found volume. He even argued with Michael over baseball teams, his stubborn opinions a delight. At night, when old nightmares clawed him awake, I sat on the edge of his bed, rubbing his back until his breath calmed. "You're safe here," I whispered every time. "No one will hurt you now." Michael changed too. The guilt of failing to see Sarah's schemes did not vanish, but it burned into resolve. He began volunteering with a local advocacy group for foster children. Where once his words revolved around clients and deadlines, now he spoke of funding shortages, children in need, ways to help. The spark in him reminded me of the boy he once was, before adulthood bent him toward convenience and calculation. Meanwhile, Sarah unraveled. The divorce turned bitter, her lawyer clawing for assets she believed she deserved. But each piece of evidence stacked higher against her: the photographs, the clinic reports, the banking records in her handwriting. The court stripped her of any claim to my finances. More serious still were the criminal charges. Investigators uncovered her forged medical notes, unauthorized access to my accounts, and the testimony of a child who had seen her pour poison into a mug. Fraud, identity theft, elder abuse. The list grew heavy enough to sink even her polished facade. Her nursing license was suspended indefinitely. Whispers of jail time followed her like a shadow. She had plotted to make me vanish into a facility, but instead it was her life collapsing. 6 months later, the adoption hearing arrived. That morning, I brewed 3 mugs of coffee, real coffee, nothing hidden, nothing poisoned. Michael hummed off key upstairs while Tommy hunched over math homework, his glasses sliding down his nose. The house no longer felt like a cage. It pulsed with the messy, ordinary life of a family beginning again. Grandma Dorothy Tommy asked, without looking up, "Can you help me with number 7? I keep messing it up." My heart swelled at the title. Grandma. I leaned over and corrected his mistake, and his grin lit the kitchen brighter than the sun outside. At the courthouse, Judge Henderson listened carefully as the paperwork was read aloud. She asked Tommy if he understood what adoption meant and if he was sure. He straightened his thin shoulders and answered firmly, though his hands trembled. "They already are my family. This just makes it official." The gavel struck, and in that moment, Tommy Chen became Tommy Wells, my grandson, not just in love, but in law. Michael slipped an arm around him, and I held his small hand. For the first time since Frank's death, I felt whole again. Outside, the street hummed with ordinary life cars, passing voices drifting, but Tommy looked up at me with a question that silenced it all. If I hadn't warned you about the coffee that day, what would have happened? The truth was heavy, but I gave it to him. "Your courage saved us all, Tommy. Without you, I might have ended up drugged and locked away, forgotten. Michael might have lost his mother, and you might still be alone. Sometimes the world waits for someone brave enough to speak." He nodded slowly, a small smile forming the kind children wear when they realize they matter. "So we all saved each other," he said. I kissed his forehead. "Exactly, sweetheart. We all saved each other." That night, back in the house that no longer hid secrets, I tucked him into his new bed, now truly his. As I turned off the lamp, he whispered, "Good night, Grandma Dorothy." Tears pricked my eyes at the simple weight of those words. Good night, sweetheart. Sweet dreams. Life had begun with betrayal with a poisoned mug and a family cracking under greed. But it ended with something stronger, redemption, justice, and a family stitched together, not by obligation, but by love freely given. I was Dorothy Wells, 70 years old, a mother-grandmother survivor, and at last whole again. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe so others can hear it too. And tell me in the comments